All right. So let's see. Kishore is asking the first question today.
Kishore Krishna, where are you?
Very much. Pronounce. I'm at my parents' house in Massachusetts.
Give them my regards.
I will. My question is, I'm wondering what light we should see Subhadra in, standing in between Baladeva and Jagannatha.
Well, complex, like many of them, theological figure within Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but we should see her as she appeared to Kamsa, and in terms of what she said to him, which is related in the Bhagavatam and, excuse me, related again with, I would say, deeper Gaudiya insight, which is what you're after, by Rupa Goswami in his Lady Subhadra, excuse me. And therein she represents the internal potency of Krishna, a manifestation of Yoga Maya. She's the sister of Krishna, who is unknown in many respects, or who is known. It's known, I should say, that Yashoda had a daughter, not known that she had a son as well, who therefore she's called Anuja. Who came out after Anuja means birth, came out after Krishna, but Yashoda is thought to have passed out with childbirth of her son, and then the daughter issued forth as well. And and she was brought back to Mathura. Again, there she appeared before Kamsa, and it appeared ostensibly, although it's not by any means the whole picture, that Devaki's 8th child was a daughter rather than a son, according to the prophecy. But then she spoke, right? And so she speaks there if we follow. In the Bhagavatam, she speaks in what appears to be as what appears to be a manifestation of the material energy, speaking of the different forms of the goddess, Kali here, my name is Durga there, and so on and so forth. But of course, all of these deities, Durga is, after all, according to the Tantra, another name for Radha. And the internal potency and the external potency, they're very similar, like heat and cold, opposites. In between, Tatastha is more confusing. But, excuse me, as I mentioned, Lady Subhadra, she's presented as the internal energy. She speaks, and there's, I think, underlying what she's saying in the Bhagavatam is brought out by Rupa Goswami. So we see her as a manifestation of the internal potency. And later she became married to Arjuna. That's another Leela. There's some different, I wrote an article about this one time. You might want to look on the Harmonist, probably there, with regard to a prominent other opinion. And I showed from the Bhagavatam later, I believe in the 9th canto, there was some question whether the Subhadra who married Arjuna was actually the same, and so forth. Anyway, I demonstrated that it was. So you might want to look that up. But we look at her as a manifestation of the internal potency of a particular manifestation of the Yoga Maya. Subhadra Devi ki jai.
Thank you. Which section of Lalita Madhava would I look for?
In the very beginning.
Okay, thanks.
All right. The next question is from Krishna Chaitanya.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Ram.
My question is from Sri Bhaktyaloka, the niyamagraha section. There's a paragraph there where Bhaktivinoda Thakura is talking about sadhana bhakti, and he breaks it up into 4 steps: sadhana, nistha, ruci, and asakti. And he's saying that these are 4 distinct steps, and then says that sometimes someone might get too attached to the niyamas from a previous step. And if a person does so, then that could cause trouble going forward. I went back and read it, and it seems like he answered my question in a sense with what he said after that, which was that he quoted that verse that you should always remember Krishna and never forget him, and all the rules and regulations of the scriptures follow that principle. And if one does not follow that principle, then while they're going step to step, then that'll cause trouble. But either way, I'm still wondering, have you noticed, or can you think of, are there specific things maybe that someone who's kind of in the stage of nistha is holding on to when they're just an initial shraddha that cause trouble, and or someone who's should be at the stage of ruci is holding on to something and it's keeping him back, or and so on? Or is this all just an individual thing and someone should just follow that principle of always remembering Krishna and never forgetting it?
Excuse me, thank you for the question. I think that the answer to your question lies in a poetic phrase, one typical of Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, wherein he explained that progress involves acceptance and elimination. So what we accept now may need to be eliminated later when it's seen as provisional, a provisional understanding, a provisional practice, a provisional understanding of a practice, what its implications are, and so forth. And it may be that may need to be, excuse me, what helped us, a way of thinking about it or a way of practicing, no longer does, or we see through it, or we see to a deeper meaning of it, and that has to be rejected and something new accepted. So he kind of gives it what I would say is a kind of a dynamic answer to your question, which again is progress involves acceptance and elimination. And as I often say, sadhana is an art, right? So it's not just like, there are 108 things, count them on your fingers and you do them just like this and so forth. It requires some, if you practice, you're going to think about what you practice, what's the implication, what's the meaning, what did it mean to me before, what does it mean now, as I progress, and so on and so forth. And that kind of introspection is central to the practice, which is interesting because often bhakti is depicted as just emotional without any introspection. Prabhupada is always fond of emphasizing that it was as much, if not more, of an introspective path than gyan. So you have to watch what you're doing, analyze your practice, see if it's working, and adjust it, accordingly to where I live, who I associate with, what that may have been good. Like take me, for example. At one point, I thought Sarvadharman Prityaja Mamekam Sharanam, this famous one of the concluding verses of the Gita meant to join ISKCON and never leave. Later, the meaning of the verse was just the opposite. Sarvanamar Pradyaja Mamekam, because Mamekam has come to me, and he was over here now, across the Ganga in Navadvip, in the example and the person in the Siksha of Pujya Patrita Maharaj. So I marveled at the time to think the same verse meant exactly the opposite in terms of how I would practically apply it at a different time. So I think that it is individual, and it is part of the dynamic of individuals' sadhana. You have to, it's just like, you know anything about football? Probably not too much, but there's I was looking at the news. There's a famous football player now who's kind of a relationship with a famous singer. I forget her name. Maybe you know.
Swift,
Pardon me?
thinking. Taylor Swift, maybe.
Yeah, that's her name. Yeah. I've never heard her music, but she's famous, and he's a famous player, and apparently the way he plays the game, it could be studied. My analysis by devotees to understand the difference between Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti. So they say that he's one of the guys who catches the ball, but he understands the mind of the guy that throws the ball in such a way that although the play has a certain route to it, it should go like this and should turn here and should be here at this time and so forth. He's spontaneous. He just happens to go the route, but then turn it into something else, and there's a magic between the two, and they just connect. And apparently he's quite famous and good at it. And so he kind of plays like spontaneously. He knows the rules. He doesn't avoid the rules, but he knows the implication. What is the point? If the route says to go here and I'm over here, but I see at the same time that the thrower of the ball has been thrown off of his, some whatever spot, so then I'll move over here, and then they connect magically and so forth. And apparently it's a topic, in the news, because it comes out because of the relationship, which is two famous people. But there's a spontaneity. Now, Rag Bhakti means spontaneous. So I talk about it like that, but I'm also saying that sadhana has to become a little spontaneous. One has to know, be able to tell one's own temperature. And it's not just a formula. The formula's there for a purpose. And it shouldn't be neglected and so forth, but what it means and how to apply it and dynamically and so forth. This is all part of that acceptance and rejection, which Pujya said amounts to what progress amounts to, or acceptance and elimination. Acceptance and elimination, same thing. And I think that's what Bhaktivinoda Thakura was saying. Niyamagraha means to follow the rules without knowing the meaning behind them or the purpose behind them. In one sense, you have to understand, here's a dynamic perspective. All the rules, all the things that we do, they have a purpose. The purpose is that your mind will become absorbed in Krishna. So you have to see how much they're helping you do that. They're not just unto themselves something. They have that's the net purpose of all of them, right? So people go through them because they're supposed to be done because it's a law, as if I do this law, this will work, and so forth. It's only going to work as much as you become Krishna conscious from it, as it actually your mind becomes absorbed. And then when your mind is absorbed, then there are no rules. Like Prabhupada was once asked about Ekadasi, and is Ekadasi, does it mean fasting? Or he was asking, I was on the walk with Prabhupada, and the question was something about the nature of Ekadasi and fasting, and Prabhupada said, Ekadasi is feasting, not fasting. And on this day, we offer that much more to Krishna. His senses are in the apricot lila. They're more. There's more pressure from the transcendental fluids in his body on his senses, which make them more inclined to enjoy and taste. So we can offer more food, and it's feasting for Krishna. And he was talking like this, and the sannyasi was again talking about it from a more of a rules-based thing, and Prabhupada said, but for the preacher, he said, there are no rules. So he's talking about kind of a spontaneity, if you will. Then he said, but don't think that you're a preacher. So he went backwards, and so, but so he was. Another example is when the GBC of ISKCON, the governing body commission, had a problem with me because I was traveling and preaching, and I didn't have any like governing body commissioner who was like overseeing my activities. How that happened, it's all interesting, but I didn't think about it. And so they complained to Prabhupada that he doesn't have a GBC overseeing him. And Prabhupada said he doesn't need a GBC. And the GBC was, the governing body commission, was pretty important. They oversaw everything, made sure everything was right. And Prabhupada said, this guy doesn't need a GBC because the GBC is kind of a managerial position, and the perfection of the management is to manage yourself out of the position because people are inspired. They don't need to be told, they don't need to be organized. They know it, and they spontaneously do it, That's why I'm not a good organizer for people from an institutional point of view. I expect everybody just to, know it, do it, be inspired, and so forth. But Prabhupada in that instance, Prabhupada said he doesn't need a GBC. If you could manage right, everybody would be like that, and then they wouldn't need to be managed. So our sadhana should become like that, and that is requires the introspection that enables us to accept something at one point that may need to be rejected or eliminated at another point, or understanding of it maybe need to be eliminated. So niyamagraha means, you're following the rules kind of in a rote way. It's kind of dogmatic and so forth. And, let's give another example of that. There are people today who are through and through Kanishta Adhikari devotees, neophyte devotees, born in Vaishnava families, Brahmin families, in the Dham, and gurus of institutions, typically, and they're critical of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. They couldn't understand how the rules could be bent, how they were provisional. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's term Bharabhahi compared to Saragrahi. Bharabhahi means who carries the heavy burden of sectarian perspectives, misconstrues details to be principles. And Bhaktisiddhanta didn't do it like this, that was determined, which they don't even understand when and how it was determined and by whom, and so on and so forth, as if it's an eternal principle. And so therefore, he can't be bona fide. You have to learn to see. This is like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, another example. What the Goswamis did was they determined, here is the fullest form of ecstasy that's ever been seen in the religious landscape, in human history, personified. So he must be God. And then they figure, they say, well, let's try to show it by the scripture. It's not like, is his name mentioned anywhere in the scripture? I don't see it. Not here. Therefore, I'm going to deny the result, the practical. There is, They say, what is this Bhaktisiddhanta taking sannyas from a picture of Gorkashore? Where is that mentioned in any shastra that you could take a picture, give yourself sannyas from a picture? You can say whatever you want. It is a little different, but you can't deny that the character of the person, his renunciation, is extraordinary. All the criticisms, you don't ever hear any criticism of that he wasn't really renounced. Actually, he was running off with women in the secret or anything like that. His moral and spiritual character were extraordinary. So you have to take that, and then everything else has to move around that. You have to adjust and think, well, okay, he did it like that, but I guess that must find a way to show that it's bona fide for those who think it needs to be shown. So we'll find some verse, some way to put it together and do the math. And the Goswamis did this with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also. And someone may say, well, I don't agree with that interpretation of that verse. Krishna Varnam Tisa Krishna. Nobody translated it like that before. Say it's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Well, we are. And if you don't, and you want to say there's no verses, and therefore he's not what? The embodiment of love of God he is, obviously. Whoever he looks at became, blessed with prema and bhav. So you have to have a dynamic, kind of perspective here. And it's common to lose a thread. We come in to a teaching like this, converts at least, Black Hour, most of us, very dynamically, very flexible and so forth. But then you can kind of become a bit frozen by the rules and the regulations and so forth, and lose the dynamic and flex nature and flexibility that you entered in with, that was really really exemplified your eligibility, for spiritual life. Now, you need to be careful what I'm saying here. It's just, okay, Guru Maharaj said, the rules, so I don't need this one, I don't need that one. Not encouraging that, but flexibility and a dynamic approach to the sadhana is required, and that's why I call it it's an art. It's not just something out of a book. You have to take the book and you have to apply it, and then the dynamics start to develop and so forth. That's why later on somebody wrote another book about it, based on the dynamic application of it and so forth. So, this is kind of my answer to your question, is what Bhaktivinoda Thakura is talking about. I hope that helps. Bhaktivinoda Thakura ki jai.
Ramesh, I had a quick follow-up question. Is it possible sometimes that it's good not to be dynamic? Because, I guess in terms of what you were saying, that if you start applying this dynamism too early, you're just going to throw yourself in the ditch in a way, because you don't know what's what.
I would say it is dynamic in the beginning for the first 10 or 20 years to just follow. You start to become, I see this, dynamic too early, and you go off the map. They see Guru Maharaj is dynamic. I'll be dynamic. I'll think about it differently. And they go off the map. They don't want to. I was just reading a book recently about the Sanskrit poetics a fellow had done. And I could see that he's a younger fellow and he's learned, but he's all kind of gone off the map. He doesn't quite. So, yeah, it's dynamic just to follow at a certain point, and not think about it. In my own life, when I met Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, she said that Guru Maharaj said, Prabhupada Swami Maharaj put so many things inside of your heart, you didn't even know it. Slip them in there. And now they're coming to the surface in his absence. And now you have to think about all those things, what they meant, how to apply them, and so on and so forth. Or was a period where you were just following, you just doing. And he was there telling. Now he's not there. Now I have to think about dynamically. I had been involved for quite a few years by then. So yeah, that's a good point.
So would you say that the defining factor is actually whether you're getting nourished and you feel like you're making progress or not? If you're just following, you're still getting that nourishment, then there's no problem. But then, okay, that makes sense. So then you start kind of calcifying at some point if you only try to follow, and then you got to start thinking about it or something like that.
Well, I think when the opportunity presents itself, when circumstances present themselves, you have to then you have to be reflective, and like Pujapachidamar said, you have to accept. Then you can. There's some tension comes, and you have to eliminate and so forth. So it's something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you for that. And then the next question is from Krishnadas.
Dandavats, good morning, Guru Maharaj. Nice to see you.
Mutual.
So I was reading chapter 34 of Jiva Dharma recently, and I had a question about, wanted to get some clarification on a statement that Gopal Guru Goswami says to Vijay Kumar when he's kind of explaining the different types of Sakhis. He says, the topmost Sakhis joyfully consider themselves Radha's Nija Jana, followers and recipients of her love, and simultaneously possess equal love for Srimati Radhika and Sri Krishna. They are the Priya Sakhis and parama-prestha-sakhis. So I was a bit confused by that, because here he's kind of speaking about those Sakhis who love Radha and Krishna equally as kind of being topmost, but usually I hear I guess more commonly that those who are more attracted to Radharani are kind of spoken of in a more exalted way. So I was wondering if you could clarify that.
Yes. I think that Ujjwal Nilmani, which is largely paraphrased or restated in the section of Jiva Dharma you're talking about, those later chapters. Ujjwal Nilmani is a book about Madhurya Rasa, penned by Rupa Goswami as a sequel to his Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu. And excuse me, and in that book, he mentions the parama-prestha-sakhis, the Priya Sakhis, the Nitya Sakhis, and Pran Sakhis, and maybe just Sakhis. And so there's a hierarchy there. So when he says that, and yes, you're right, in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, what's emphasized, Rupa Goswami says there are two types of Madhurya Bhava, principally. One is Sambhoga, one is Tadbhava. Sambhoga or Kantabhava is sometimes called, means that the gopi is a lover of Krishna. And she will have attendants of her own and friends and so forth, assistants, like Radha. Okay, the principal gopi. And then there are, in this case, she's the example of Kantabhav, and then there are those who place themselves underneath her and serve her, and they have a form, one or another type of Tadbhav. Sambhog means union. Kantabhav, Sambhog, means that the gopi has direct romantic relationship with Krishna. Tadbhav means that the gopis prefer to assist the bhav of the kanta, of lover, of Radha. And so these 5 or 4, whatever is mentioned, these parama-prestha-sakhis, like Lalita and Vishaka, they could be group leaders in Kantabhav, but that they subjugate themselves to Radha and they have equal love for Radha and Krishna. So in hierarchy, within the structure of the Leela, they are higher. So, and for example, they are served by Priya-sakhis. They have Priya-sakhis. Now these parama-prestha-sakhis, these Priya-sakhis, they might have a direct relationship, sambhog, with Krishna on occasion. If Krishna so desires, and Radharani says, go to him now, and they'll go. It's not their first foot forward. Their first foot forward is to promote and assist Radha's union with Krishna. But sometimes they have direct union with Krishna. And they love Krishna and Radha, as you mentioned, as Bhaktivinoda mentioned, equally. Now you're going down the ladder within the hierarchy of the structure of the Leela, to those who are the nitya-sakhis and pran-sakhis. These are sometimes referred to as manjaris, right? So they're younger, and their love for Radha and Krishna is such that it's a little more for Radha than it is for Krishna. And with regard to sambhog, which is the desire of Radha to have union with Krishna, they don't have that desire. They militate against that. Sometimes even Radha says, "Oh, he's very nice. You should have a relationship." And they, no. And then Krishna is very pleased to see their fidelity to Radha only, and so forth. So they have common. They have romantic. Krishna is the perfect romantic hero, for them. But the math of it all is they see that Radha is more capable of fulfilling his desires than we are. So let us serve her. And that way that'll please him. So this is called the Manjari Bhav, right? And we say that is the highest ideal. Rupa Goswami says of the two, Sambhoga and Tadbhava, the latter is favorable. The latter is favorable. So now your question, well, I thought, if they're favorable, they're the highest. Why are the parama-prestha-sakhis being called? Because they're highest in terms of the hierarchy of the social structure. In that sense, they're higher. And the manjaris are serving them. But from another perspective, they come closer to Radha, if you will. They're her maidservants than anyone else. And the more dear you become to Radha, then the more dear you are to Krishna, is the idea. You follow?
Yes, thank you very much, Guru Maharaj. That was very helpful.
Okay. Anything else? Did you want to add something, Guru Maharaj, or should I?
No, next question.
Okay. This is from Jayadev Prabhu. It's a little longer question. He says, we often hear of Daiva Netrena, that no living entity is independent and is ultimately controlled by their karma and the three modes of material nature. We also hear Srila Prabhupada often say in lectures and purports that one should not bother or labor hard for happiness, nor in trying to avoid suffering, because both of these things just come and go based on our destiny and karma. So it seems in one sense, we're just passive observers helplessly watching our karma play out in this material stage. So as an aspiring devotee, I may struggle hard against my lower nature for sense enjoyment, but my karma keeps bringing it to me, sometimes even without my effort. So I guess this question is twofold. One, am I truly independent to stop my karma and sense enjoyment? Or am I locked up in my karma and just have to tolerate the reactions, both good and bad? And then two, if destiny is king and I am already destined to enjoy and suffer in various ways before I'm even born, then how does one have any hope of changing their consciousness? How can one just, quote unquote, flip a switch and all of a sudden think, act, feel, and perceive the world in a transcendental way, or from the platform of eternal real self, much like in the way that Jagai and Madhai did? Thank you.
Well, I think that you have to understand that all the talk of destiny tied to karma and so forth, something that's often missed, and it's like the nose on your face, is that karma makes absolutely no sense if the individual jiva doesn't have a will and a role to play. Because it's the karma is a reaction from what you do willfully. Now, it's true that you may willfully do something in such a way that it creates a very strong samskar and vasana. It becomes like a psychological disposition that then is powerful enough to weigh on your will, so that you can't express your will in a contrary way to it, and now you're driven less by your will and more by the reaction of things that you've done in the past. But regardless, as much as we may be a conditioned, materially conditioned jivatma, may be moving almost without exercise of the will, just on the strength and the power and the momentum of previous karma. Still, you cannot get away from the fact that the karma is only accrued by actions that one performs. And this is a very strong point in Govinda Bhasha of Baladeva Vijayabhushan. It's a strong point for a number of reasons, because it's true, for one, and two, because, well, you're not going to find that in the way to Vedanta. You're not going to find that in Patanjali's system of yoga, that the jiva has will. It's just a witness, and it's just an illusion, in the way to Vedanta. But in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Gaudiya Vedanta, in all schools of Vedanta, the jiva has will. Baladeva gives the example of kind of a will within determinist, what would you call it? I forget the technical terms, but determinist perspective, well, it's already determined, God's will is everything. It's already happened. So what do you have to do? He says, like you go out, you want to have, you want to grow wheat. Well, the farmer goes out and plants the seeds. It's required that he plants the seeds, but it won't grow if the diamond of train doesn't give rain. So we're dependent on an overarching will. That's true, but we are a unit of will nonetheless. So we have willpower. It's not the hammer that does the carpentry. It's the hand that holds it and moves it. So you take the Gita statement, Prakriti Kriyamani Gunai Karmani Sarvasya, Ahankara Vimunatma Karta Hambati Manite. He says the jiva thinks that it's doing things that are actually just the motions of material nature. But the next verse describes a situation wherein the jiva understands what's going on. Forget that next verse, but you might want to read it. And that's for the completely materially conditioned jiva. But if one understands this, the idea is to come out from that and do something about it, right? Even materially speaking, that will shows up. You may have a samskar for such that you become an alcoholic. It doesn't mean that you can't come out from that and exercise your will and change your destiny. Central, again, to karma is the will of the jiva. The more things are done unwillingly or unknowingly, well, the less reaction they're going to have. That's another thing. If a Brahmin who knows better commits a particular sin, he's going to get a different reaction than one who's not educated and doesn't know better. So you're a person who has something to do with it all. You have everything to do with it all. Now, the more we become covered by material nature, the more our will becomes covered. So we don't find, a tree is a living being, but the Atma is so covered there, its capacity to express will, is limited to, at best, compared to the human society. We see that humans can change, even have strong vasanas, collection of samskars, the psychological propensities and so forth that cause them to be a certain way. We can see that they can change it. So the will of the jiva is there, and if it wills to take advantage of divine intervention in the form of sadhusanga, then it has a new factor, because that jiva that is unfettered, uncovered by material nature, its will is fully operative. Therefore, the liberated jiva is called satya-sankalpa. Whatever the gopis want, whatever the gopas want, in the context of rasa, it happens. They may want union with Krishna, it doesn't happen with them. Well, I guess their will is not happening, but you have to understand the dynamic of rasa and how that works. So there will be apparent, separation and union or failure for something to happen. And that's all part of the whole lila, right? So one of the qualities of the liberated soul is satya-sankalpa, because that jiva's will, becomes one with Krishna's will, which is dynamic. And so it's whatever he wants, they're an instrument through which it's being fulfilled. And then this in the context of lila, sometimes I say from the abed, non-different point of view, the spiritual body and the liberated jiva is an expansion of Krishna's body. And through another set of senses, beyond his own, he's experiencing further. That's from, so there's a oneness there. So whatever he wants, whatever the jiva wants, will be fulfilled. Satya-sankalpa. So if you have this divine intervention coming from this side, where then the more that influence of bhakti comes into your life, the more the beginning stages, we determine it by the more you're becoming uncovered from the modes of material nature, the more you're becoming capable of, with the strength and help from that side, of willing in a way that is contrary to the reaction in the form of karma to what you have willed in the past. That's determining your present. So the past is in the present, the future is in the present. And if you have your own will, is what I'm saying. And if you have the divine will in your life as well, in the form of sadhusanga and a course of actions that you can, with your will. So bhakti is two things, right? In terms of practice, it has mercy and effort. Mercy and effort. So mercy is there. The opportunity comes, the explanation, the example is there, showing you how to do it. And then you exercise your will. Now here your will has the capacity to function better than at, with regard to an ultimate solution to the problem, better than, the 10 steps or whatever it is, 12 steps or something an alcoholic may go to. I gave that example earlier. His own will, with the help of others, is trying to come out from underneath this destiny that's created by how he exercised his will in the past. But here you have a situation now. This is better than the 12 steps. Of course, it may not be better than the 12 steps in terms of getting over a particular karmic problem, that you want to just focus on that particular problem. But in terms of a comprehensive solution to the dilemma of our karmic plight, then with this bhakti ingress into our life, we have even greater potential to bring out our own will and to exercise our will in such a way as to embrace the teachings wholeheartedly and retire the whole karmic destiny. So now your question was kind of complicated and long. I don't know if I fully addressed it, but I don't know if you're on personally, then you can certainly come back and ask for further clarification or mention something that I might have forgotten in your question, but I think this is the heart of it. You're asking about, everything is controlled. Where do I have a position? Well, you have will, and the more that you become uncovered from matter, the more that will starts to become operative in your life. And that said, indeed, from another like scientific kind of point of view, there's a perspective that some embrace, wherein the will or consciousness is a factor in what happens. Right? Some people can't, in the scientific community, don't see that at all, but others do. They look at the quantum, subatomic realm, and they look at the quantum field as a field of potentialities, and then so there's a possibility to go into meditation, and as you become free from the Maya Shakti, you can create your own destiny. The will of the jivas, actually. So anyway, there's much room for your own will and much room for your own effort. And if you apply your effort in relation to the grace in the form of teachings, the personification of the teachings, which makes them easier to follow and dynamic in application compared to the text itself. Apply yourself to that, and you have not only your own will, but the supreme will on your side. You should be successful.
Thank you. Let's see. Next question is from Uddhava.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Haribo.
My question
Can't hear
has
you.
been
There you go.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My question has been partially answered already in the lecture. I wanted to ask, that since nowadays, there is a focus, on being like inclusive, progressive, dynamic, adapting everything, I would like to ask how to be orthodox, like in the, in the current society, in a nice way, that focus, of being orthodox, staying true to the essence of Gaudiya Vaishnavism and so on.
Well, I think that I could tell you this, that when I was young and I was in ISKCON, all of us followers of Prabhupada's disciples, even a short step on the part of one of us outside of what was understood as the orthodox practice of the time was stood out like a sore thumb, like he's in Maya, right? But now the ingress of the world and the influence, it seems so much stronger on the devotees, especially with the help of the internet. The competition of ideas and perspectives and so forth is much greater. And I do see that the community, international community, which is spawned by my Guru Maharaj, is very much distracted from the path. Now, I joined Gaudiya Vaishnavism with the exclusive purpose in mind of becoming enlightened. Not for any material solution, not for having a group or having a community. That was not of any concern to me. I was leaving communities that all fell short, in my opinion. A whole counterculture. Of course, Krishna consciousness, in one sense, was part of the counterculture, but it was counter to the counterculture in many respects. So I think that you have to keep that in mind, that what this is about is enlightenment, and it's for you to become enlightened. I mean, I'm just using a word, enlightened, to develop praying, whatever, you can define it different ways, but to come out of the illusion of material existence. That's what it's about. Now, that's a very noble and a high thing, but it's not going to be popular. There may be popular forms of it and so forth. You use the same words and language and even do some of the same things, but it's not the focus. The popular focus is not going to be, I want to become enlightened. I want to become, I'm in an illusion. I'm an Atma. I don't know it experientially. And that Atma is part and parcel of Krishna, and Krishna is all lovable. And these are all the theory, but I don't know it experientially. But I'm happy that I've got that theoretical understanding, and I've got the means within the context of that theoretical understanding to apply myself to attain that. That's what I want to do. That's what my life's about. It should revolve around that. It's possible. It sounds like a monk's life, but bhakti is very powerful, so it's possible to do that as a householder as well. But it's not going to be, the way that you do that is not going to make you the most popular person in the world. You may become popular after you're dead because of things that you said that people will like, and then they'll misinterpret to a large extent and so forth. But in a land where falsity is the norm, truth is not going to be very popular. And this is, we're talking on a high, even on a lower level, truth is not very popular in Kali Yuga. Even on a material level. Nowadays, people are very fond of material knowledge to improve their material situation. According to the Bhagavatam, this is knowledge in the mode of ignorance. Knowledge about the Atma, that's in the mode of goodness. Knowledge that involves debating different issues, well, that's in the mode of passion. Knowledge about Krishna says that's transcendental. So a lot of the knowledge that people are very concerned with in order to be more complete people is really knowledge in the mode of ignorance. That's a fact. We may need to become healthier, we may need to become more psychologically balanced and so forth or whatnot, but this is material knowledge. Broadly speaking, it's knowledge in the mode of ignorance. Unto itself, it's not going to get you into Krishna consciousness. That's another kind of knowledge. So there's a place for that kind of lower knowledge, but it has to be looked at in light of higher knowledge and my goal and my ideal. And as much as the latter is gets pushed out of the picture, then we have a form of material knowledge that's in the mode of ignorance with all kind of Krishna conscious terminology and maybe even dress and so on and so forth. So it's just really largely mundane. So you don't want to be part of that. Now, it's difficult because you're in the world, you got to work and meet people and so on and so forth. But if you have a high ideal and you stick to it and so forth, you'll be a curious person for people. And again, it's not that you're going to ignore material knowledge. Also, you have to have some material knowledge to have a job, to be healthy. And those things are there, but you can't let those things get the upper hand and become everything and the actual underlying essential teachings and goal and ideal becomes lost. And I'm just, I'm going to chant Hare Krishna, but I want Hare Krishna chanting and practice to be such that it's popular, that I can get along with everybody. We have a nice big group, and it's even bigger and bigger. And Krishna consciousness is kind of like becoming thinner and thinner and thinner in this kind of perspective, right? You don't want that. I don't know if I'm addressing your question or not, but I'm it's something I think about too. So I'm trying to. So I think that you have to focus on what it's about, what you came for, and so on and so forth. And you have to do other things because you have a level body car, and you may have children. Let's say, for example, they're not interested in Krishna consciousness. They don't even know what it is. They can pretend, because they're not adult enough. And then they're going to get they're going to get distracted and so on. So you have to deal with that dutifully and so on, but with a detachment, not as detachment that is without affection for them, real concern for them, and so forth, but with attachment of wisdom of what's all really taking place on a deeper level. And your relationship with them will be terminated in its own course. And so you factor that in, and when that's over, it's not an issue for you. Your death won't be an issue for you because it's been factored in. You know what is the temporal, and then you play a perfect role in the temporal life without any attachment to it. It's difficult to do, but this is the idea: be in the world, but not of it. Many devotees are more of the world than they are in it and not of it. They're in it and of it, but they recite some verse or whatever, some idea, and they tweak it to make it psychologically popular and so on. Now, that said, there's also something to be said for understanding on a deeper level what Krishna consciousness is, universally speaking. What are the underlying philosophical concepts, theological concepts, and so forth. And when you do that successfully, then they become very, perhaps more interesting, more universally something that people can connect with. If I say that Krishna's blue and he's God and he plays a flute, it's like, what? That's weird. But if I explain Krishna in another way, that God is the personification of youthfulness, the beauty, of the attractiveness of adolescence, and so on. And people may identify with that, and you can speak of bhakti in a universal sense and so forth. That requires some deeper understanding, come from deep sadhana and good sadhu sangha, and so on and so forth. And in that position, then I think that you can really resolve the dilemma that you're presenting. But anyway, I'm just kind of rambling about the topic. Does that help? You're frozen there. You're frozen, stunned. Must be a sattvika bhav right there on the computer for everybody to witness. Look at him. Hope that helps.
Can I ask a further clarification?
Did you hear everything, Uddhava, I said?
Only the last part I missed. I disconnected only the punchline.
You went into a trance there. We were frozen, so we appreciated that. I hope that's helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
I had a quick follow-up, just asking for clarification. So I was thinking about this thing that you were talking about, how there's this mood now that, let's be so psychologically balanced, which is not a bad thing, like you said, in itself. But do you think that does it have something to do with the fact that people can't follow the full thing, right? Like 99.9% of devotees can't follow the full program. And so it requires this level of humility to be I'm not eligible for the highest thing, but that's my goal. And instead they try to water it down to the level that they are at. And they say, that's the full face of Krishna consciousness. That's the real right way of doing it. So like, do you think there's something to that? Do people like who start watering it down, do they lack humility, or why are they watering it down like that?
Well, everyone lacks humility to some extent by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's standard of humility. And it's something that we cultivate. I don't know if humility is the best word, but, that's a problem, what you're talking about. That happens. And then we become invested in a Kanishta-adhikari conception of Gaudiya Vaishnavism as if it's the goal. And so you need, sadhu sangha to shock you and out of that, illusion, and prod you to go forward, and so on and so forth. So I think without good association, that is more likely to happen. Whereas in a good association, the guru, the sadhu is not there just to pat you on the back, but to challenge you to make progress and so forth. So that's kind of the solution to that, and we need that ongoing. But it does happen. You're right. And that's where it really starts to become a problem. It's not a problem to be a Kanishta Adhikari, but it's a problem to start thinking that the Kanishta Adhikari conception is the goal. Mm-hmm. All right, well, that's it. We've gone over the time by a couple of minutes. Maybe there's some questions that didn't get answered, but we have time next Sunday to answer them. So nice to be with all of you. Haribo.
Haribo, Srila Guru Maharaj ki jai. Quick announcement as usual. Next Thursday, Mara Mohan is going to give a class called Diving Deep into Bhagavad Gita, verses 1.1 to 1.10. And that's it for this week. I hope to see you all next Sunday, Thursday too. Haribo.